So I'm assuming you've clicked here because you want to learn how to actually study for exams. And I first and foremost want to say I'm so proud of you for taking this step. Learning how to study is something that the entire school system doesn't really show you how to do. You just kind of fed information, they give you homework, and that's about as far as I go when it comes to study strategies, right? So, before I get started, I'm just going to give you guys a quick overview into who I am and I guess why you should even listen to me in the first place. So, I am a recent graduate of engineering. I did a bachelor's of renewable energy engineering at the University of New South Wales. I spent 4.5 years pursuing a very challenging degree that definitely tested me when it came to learning things. And prior to that, I was in high school, right? So I got an ATAR above 90 as well, when I graduated high school to get into my dream degree. And if there's one thing I can sort of, attest all of this to, it is definitely the fact that I had to learn how to learn things really fast. And, I wanted to get through all of my exams in the smartest way possible. I didn't want to have to worry about force feeding myself information and learning it all from scratch. And if I was going to learn it from scratch, I wanted to do it in a way that was fun. So this guide is basically going to be me passing on what I've learned. I hope it helps one of you. It doesn't matter if you're a university student, a high school student, if you're just a kid trying to get their parents off their back for not getting grades that are good enough. I've been there. And I hope you guys can learn at least something from this presentation. So, the conventional advice for hard concepts or learning in general doesn't seem to work for the majority. We're told to sometimes reread over the hard concepts. Again, reading doesn't really have a high retention rate, it's only about 10%. And in my experience, reading over something is just not as effective. Doing tons and tons of practice questions again in silence, this can work. This is actually not a bad idea. But obviously, there's a way to sort of accelerate your learning with practice questions. And I'm going to explain what that is in the next slide. Designating a study area doesn't always work, actually. I find having one study area sometimes isn't the best. It's good to have a couple of areas where you can kind of rotate between just to keep things fresh and exciting. And obviously, just spending more time. And I'm going to show you guys that spending more time doesn't always translate into better understanding. You can be smart with the way you study. So these aren't the most effective ways to study, as per the reasons I just spoke about. I found there are much nicer ways to get things into your brain without these very arduous, long, you know, strategies that require slogging. So here's the thing: it's a little bit different, and you're gonna have to bear with me on this one because it's something that took me a while to learn, and it might take you a while to get grasp as well, which is okay. But you basically want to teach your hard concept or any concept to someone. Okay, so instead of being the person that is trying to force feed this stuff into our brain, we're going to try and teach this hard concept to someone. I know it sounds really weird because obviously it's like, well, how can I teach this to someone if I don't even understand it myself? But bear with me, I'm going to make it easy for you to use this as a study strategy, even if you don't actually understand the concept first. And again, if it doesn't make sense right now, bear with me. I promise it'll hopefully start clicking in the next couple of slides. So, first and foremost, why this is more effective. I switched to this strategy in my second year of university. So, this is during my second year of my engineering degree when the concept started to get a lot more technical and it was getting a little bit harder to kind of explain things just by reading over them in my textbooks. I had to find a way to make it a bit more easy for it to stick in my brain. So, obviously, the first one is a 90% retention rate, right? So, many sources have confirmed this that, teaching is the best way to actually learn something. You will retain the majority of it if you teach it to someone because it's proof that you understand it. So this is a big one here. School seems to always want you to memorize stuff. Whether you're a technical background or not, there's always a degree of memorization that comes with doing an exam. And by teaching this content to imaginary people or even real people, it forces you to understand the content and not actually memorize it. Okay. And same as someone once said, if you can't explain it, you simply don't understand it. So understanding is always better than memorizing, and this particular strategy does do that. So here's how to actually study by teaching, which is again a really odd concept, but I'm going to go through some examples as well and show you guys how this actually works. So you want to find someone to explain concepts to. Friends working in like a massive group of people is always fantastic. A family member, if you can. Obviously, this is a lot harder. Now, if you're a bit more introverted and don't have like a big friend circle to speak to, that's okay. I didn't always have this myself. So you can even just speak out loud to yourself and pretend you are teaching someone. Again, a bit weird, but as long as you are speaking out loud and explaining your concept to someone, even if they are a bit imaginary, it does work. Okay. You're going to obviously write out summary notes on the difficult concepts. So I'm going to show you how to break down like large chunks of content into like more digestible sentences and make it easier for you. Again, you want to explain the concept out loud. It's kind of like you're tutoring someone in a way. If you can teach your concept to either a real person or your imaginary person and not have to look at your notes anymore, it's proof you understand it. If you can't do this, you simply don't understand it and it won't go in your brain. Okay. And of course, step 4 is repeat until you can explain the concept again with no difficulty. So this works for all degrees, obviously, as you guys might have figured out by now. But I'm going to go through 2 examples now. One is going to be a technical concept that I actually learned in my degree, and the other is going to be a non technical concept that might apply for someone who's a bit more creatively minded. So even if you aren't technical nor creative, or if you're one or the other, just bear with me. I promise I'll make this worth your while. So I'm going to go through 2 examples on how to break down difficult concepts because, you know, if we're taught to study something, we normally get given like a massive word dump of information, kind of like this, where we are just kind of told to read this and understand it. And a lot of people can get put off by this because it's a big chunk of information. As you guys can see, it's not necessarily like easy to just read all of this and pretend to understand it. Lots of words make it hard to understand. It can be intimidating to look at this and read over it. As you can see, this is quite technical, right? This is not exactly a straightforward concept here. This is one of the concepts I was introduced to in my second year. Not easy to get the first time around. A lot of complex terms, some big terms here that you have to sort of know. So here's how I would go about breaking down this content. So we have, maybe roughly 100 words here. I want to try and break it down into about 30 or 40 words that are digestible for all of us. So the first thing I sort of do is always when it comes to technical concepts, there's always a definition and a explanation behind what the concept is and what it does. So in this case, I've got bypass diodes, right? And I've sort of just written out in one sentence just a summary as to what it is, right? So what it is, when they're used, and why they exist. From there, I go into a how. Okay, so now you can see here, I've kind of jumped from the first paragraph, sorry, into now talking about what it does. I'm already on the second paragraph here. So this first paragraph, which is like a massive word dump, is summarized now basically here in like 2 small sentences. So, if you're opening this for the very first time and you have to learn this stuff for an exam, honestly, I'm sure the majority of people would want to sort of read this over this. Yeah. So number 2 is how does it accomplish its function? Well, again, I've got that written down. Summarize it in one sentence. It's connected in parallel with the photovoltaic cells, and it prevents current from flowing back to healthy unshaded cells. So notice here how I've just taken the key concepts. I haven't used a lot of these filler words, right? So instead of filler words, I've actually got arrows. You might notice these 2 arrows here. And the whole reasoning for the arrows is kind of to simulate like a flow chart in a sense, where, okay, this first sentence will connect to this second sentence here, right? So if you think about understanding the concept, so you're connected in parallel with photovoltaic cells, and this then leads to a prevention of current flowing back to healthy unshaded cells, right? So basically, I'm just summarizing everything I can. And then I go into the last part, which is the blocking diodes, right? So blocking diodes versus bypass diodes. And again, you can see here, I've just summarized it into like 2 really small sentences. So take the key concepts, break it down. So I've now basically changed this 2 big paragraph word dump into like 3 to 4 digestible sentences that cover all of the core functions that I need to know. Because don't forget, a lot of these words can be filler, right? And you can always put filler concepts, or sorry, filler words, I apologize, into your answers. You don't always have to know everything word for word. So if you have to open up your test notes and obviously look at these two, you have the two paragraphs and this particular breakdown. The breakdown is far better, right? The breakdown just makes it easier for you, and it's something I started using when I was getting into more technical things in my degree. And now you want to explain this out loud. So instead of using this massive word dump, you're going to use this little list that I've made here, right? Of the three, topics, three small sentences. Use that to explain to someone what a bypass diode is. Now, obviously, the way you want to do this is at first you will kind of have to look at your notes. So you might even for the first 5 times of explaining it, just use your notes to explain it to someone. And then maybe in the future, right, depending if your exams are online or not, if your exam is online, that will do. That's the best way to understand something. If your exam is not online, let's say you've gone back to in-person exams because of COVID, ending and not being as prominent as it used to be, you will have to eventually just cover it up and try and explain it again and again. So that's one way of breaking something down and then using the teaching method once again to get it in your brain. Okay, so one more example. I'm going to do it again, but with something nowhere near as technical. I'm going to do it on a history excerpt. So this is just a screenshot I got from Britannica. And you can see here that it's a massive word dump. Again, there's just a lot of words. I don't want to read all of this. I don't want to memorize all of it. It's just, for me, not going to be fun. There's a lot of key dates I have to know, a lot of key events I have to know. And yeah, if you hate reading at all, this is off-putting for you. You'd hate to read this, right? I personally would not want to read 2 big paragraphs and try and, memorize all of this. It's just terrible. So when it comes to non-technical content, I found that when I was in high school, I used to try and break it down into key points. So I start off with the Great War. So notice here, you've got this big sentence that sort of introduces the Great War and what it is and, when it happened. You don't need all of these words, right? You can see here, I've just got AKA Great War and then arrow, occurred between 1914 and 1918. Done. That's the key ideas, right? Then I've got Central Powers versus Allies. So instead of having this massive sentence here, the key words that I have are Central Powers and Allies, right? And they were obviously opposed to each other. So I've just gone ahead and broken it down again. And then instead of being like, hey, and with the defeat of the Central Powers, the war was virtually unprecedented, I've just said Central Powers lost, right? Because again, like I said, you can always fill in a word gap if there is one. Okay, I've done a bit of a format change. I apologize if it looks a bit odd. But the second part is now the second paragraph. So I summarize each paragraph again. Number 2 is what is the effect? So again, fall of 4 imperial dynasties, Germany, Russia, Austria, Hungary, and Turkey, and so on and so forth. So you guys get the idea. I'm taking the key points, making it into a very small sentence with just the things I need to know, and trust yourself in tests or whatever that you do, right, to fill the gaps in between these key concepts. So if I know the key concepts about, the Great War, I can trust myself to add bullshit filler words if I have to. But as long as you know the key ideas, you can make, any big amount of content just look a lot more digestible. Now, again, using these two, little lists that I've made, you would then teach it out loud to someone. So whether it's a physical person, whether it's just even like your wall, right? If you can speak it out loud and teach it to someone without looking at these notes, it's proof you understand it. So that concludes this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please leave any in the comments and let me know if you want to see anything else. And I hope this helps you all out. Have a great day.